I'm going to serve as the warm up today to warm up the crowd, for the big presentation of Dr. Penbaker. So the presentation I'm going to make today is based on the paper that I published with three other wonderful co-authors, Victoria Talwar, Pierre Tuskelec, and Vincent Rivière. I present this paper. Actually, I started working on this paper before we started the Deception Research Society, and because of the pandemic and family and personal situations, it took a long time to finish, and ultimately it was accepted and published in Applied Cognitive Psychology earlier this year. And this is a bibliometric paper. So the goal was really to, so what is bibliometric is a way to analyze data from scientific papers in a way that is nearly impossible to do by hand. So for example, if you have a very small areas of research and you have maybe 100 or 200 paper, well, you could go through the papers by hand, and it would be possible to get the data out and understand this field. However, if you have way more paper in a scientific or research area, then this is really difficult to basically understand this field of research more broadly. So this is when bibliometrics comes is helpful. So essentially,
Vincent, can I just check? Can you go to full screen? Or
oh yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So the plan of the talk today, I'm going to address the why and the identification of the articles and the results. Essentially, what you see here. So why do a bibliometric research? Well, essentially is to raise awareness on the full scope of research finding on deception and lying to help the scientific community. And this is why I wanted to do that bibliometric papers with my colleagues. And as you will see, this field of research is extremely rich. And one of the conclusions I make out of this paper is essentially to say to the public who doesn't really know about the scientific research on deception and lying and might be interested in bullshit technique, I'm going to call them like that actually there is research on deception and lying, and there's a lot of research about it. So it's not a new field of research. It really is something where there's an entire scientific community working on the subject across the world. So the main challenge for a bibliometric paper is really to identify the articles that will be in your database. And we decided to use Web of Science. Probably most of you know about this search engine for research papers. There are other search engines. We decided that we would use Web of Science. And once you have that, so you have that search engine, you need to define the boundaries of the research field of deception and lying. And that was really difficult. Ultimately, the decision was arbitrary, because where does deception and lying starts and where does it end? Do you include conspiracy theories? Do you include pseudoscience? So these are all subjects that are in the ecosystem of deception and lying. So if you do a bibliometric research, you need to establish the boundaries. But then it doesn't stop there, because is a paper within or outside the boundaries that you've defined? And how do you decide that a paper is within the boundary or outside the boundaries? For example, if you have a paper that, well, there are many papers that you could say, well, it's easily, you can put them in the database. It's really clear it's about deception and lying. But if a paper addressed deception in line, but it's not the main object of the paper, is it within the boundary? Is it outside of the boundaries? So this was really the difficult part, and in the paper we explained the choice that we made, and of course different choice could have resulted in different results. Essentially, what we came to is different parameters in Web of Science. So we searched the title, the keyword of the authors, and the keywords plus, which are generated by Web of Science. We decided to keep only articles and review articles, and those articles in English. This was the number of articles actually before just selecting the articles in English for the papers. It is important to understand that within the 8,150 papers, some of them were removed by hand. Let me give you an example. Lying. Well, if you have an article about cows lying in the field, this article would have popped up in the 8,150 articles. So those articles were removed when they were really not about deception and lying. Another example, patients lying in the hospital. So these articles would pop up sometimes, so we removed those articles by hand. So at the end, we had the database was actually 7,290 articles in English. So these are the articles that I'll show you the results for. Okay, so those articles, when you look at the decades of publication, just to know a little bit more about the fields, and again, there are limitations of using Web of Science, and I totally acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that in the papers. But really, there's a lot of publications within the past decades, really a lot. So the field is really growing. And actually, if my recollection is correct, when you look at the number of papers published more generally across all the fields of research, really deception and lying is really growing really fast compared to research more generally. If you look at the papers, where are they published? The first journal where papers on deception and lying, generally, okay, so it's not just about deception detection and lie detection. So deception and lying more generally, it's the first journal is Applied Cognitive Psychology. It's not by chance that we try to submit it there first, actually, and we are really happy it was published. But this is actually how we determined the journal we wanted to submit it to first. But one of the things that comes out of those results is really that there's really no journal that really pops out for deception and lying. So really, it's a broad field where the subject of deception and lying is published in many different journals. So there's not one journal that really pops out. The research areas, it also shows that the research areas of deception and lying is quite vast. It's really not a surprise. Just thinking about it, that psychology, there's a lot of article in psychology, but really the subject is studied by many researchers in really different research areas. For the authors, so what we decided with all the articles in our database, we extracted the authors regardless of the authorship rank. And this is what resulted. So first, when we submitted the article, there was only the number of articles and the percentage of all articles. But following the comments, if my recollection is correct, we added the number of citations and also the average citation per articles. And it shows that what it shows essentially is that when you look at the contribution of a researcher within a research field, one of the ways of seeing that is, of course, the number of articles, but it's not the only way. So because if you publish more articles, that's a contribution, but sometimes some authors publish less articles, but they are cited more. But again, citation can be, it shows a contribution within the literature, but it doesn't mean agreement, because as you will see later, some articles can be cited a lot, but it's because they are criticized a lot. So all those metrics, so to speak, tells us more about the research field, but they all have their own limitations. Once we add the authors, what is nice with Web of Science and other database is that when you extract the information, and that's really funny because now with some cameras on, I see people who approach the screen to see all the names. So there's a program named VOS Viewer that allows you to import data from Web of Science. So we had our own database of 7,298 articles, and you can import that in VOS Viewer. So in this program, VOS Viewer is a free program that creates automatically co-authorship. And well, there are many possibilities to create networks. One of them is seeing the co-authorship networks. So in our articles, we also show that, well, some of those networks of co-authorship, again, with some, you have to define the boundaries within VOS viewers of what, and those details are in the articles. Then we look at the institution publishing on deception and lying, and again in Web of Science, this is an information that is available not for all authors, but with the data that we add, it shows, well, where articles on deception and lying are mostly published. The countries, again, results similar. It is not, the results are not unexpected, but again, it really shows that deception and lying is a subject that is studied all over the world and in many universities. So if there are any students here who are looking to pursue graduate studies, chances are that there are universities who work on the subject in your countries. So that is really interesting. Is you don't have to go to the UK or Canada or United States to study deception and lying. It really is a worldwide community of researcher, and that's very that's a good news for students. We also extracted from the data, and I'm about to finish the presentation. We also extracted from the data the keywords of the articles that we had. So of course, I removed deception and lying to see what were the other subjects related to the main research subject of deception and lying. And you see that behavior is one of the main keywords, suggesting that one of the main areas where deception and lying is studied is related to behavior, and mostly human behavior. If you look at the articles in the database, really it's not about deception in animal is studied, but it's mostly human deception. And again, this is another network that we created based on the keywords. So it really shows, of course, deception at the center and all those other subjects that and areas that gravitates around deception. So that's just another way to present data. Finally, as I mentioned to you earlier, you could look at the contribution of authors within the research field, but we also wanted to look at the articles, the most cited articles. So the table 10 that you see on your left really shows that within deception and lying, the most cited articles actually are not about deception detection and lie detection. And this put things into perspective, because when you look at, when we think about, or when the public thinks about deception and lying, well, you often get that idea that it's all about detecting liars. But actually, deception and lying is really a research field that covers really other areas of human behavior. Then you have, on your right, you have the most cited article related this time on deception detection and lie detection. And without any surprise, the Paul's article from on Tools to Deception in 2003 is really the most cited articles on deception detection and lie detection. And we decided to extract finally the most cited article on children lying behavior and child deception detection and lie detection. Of course, there would be other possibilities to extract data from Web of Science. These are the ones that we decided to analyze and present. So this is it. Thank you for your time, and I hope I warmed the crowd for Dr. Penn Baker.